Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking time out this morning for what promises to be a really exciting webinar. Um, just a couple of housekeeping points up front. Bonnie and Jess have agreed to make their slides available after today's webinar, and we're also recording the webinar for to make that available afterwards for members to or for attendees to re-examine it, or for those who were unable to make it today to hear this morning's webinar. So this morning's webinar is about unlocking atomic habits, and especially in relation to digital marketing. And without stealing any of Bonnie's or Jess's thunder, this is really about how you can make incremental changes that collectively will add up to a much bigger impact than those changes on their own may have done. So what I'd like to do now is to introduce this morning's speakers before handing over to them. So Bonnie's a seasoned creative leader and problem solver with an impressive track record spanning over 70 years in agency across the health communications industry. She's consistently excelled in coordinating large-scale national product launches and driving highly successful integrated campaigns in diverse areas of consumer health and ethical healthcare. Her expertise extends to pain relief, dermatology, smoking cessation, health education, nutrition, and many other sectors. And Jess is a highly skilled digital strategist with over 10 years of experience in digital marketing, including 4 years specialising in the health sector. Her career spans diverse sectors, including health communications, e-commerce, local businesses, and global corporate brands such as Allianz and Apple. So just before I hand over to Bonnie to take you through this morning's presentation, if you do have any questions throughout, please lodge them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if we have time at the end, we'll address those questions. So Bonnie, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Welcome everyone to Unlocking the Atomic Habits of the Digital Marketing webinar. Firstly, big thank you to each of you for joining today, and also big thanks to the wonderful team at CHP for hosting. We are really excited to dive into how small strategic changes can create significant impact in your digital marketing efforts. So I was going to talk a little bit about who we are, but Steve did a wonderful job at introducing us. So really, I'll just give you, for those who don't know who Cube are, we are a specialist communications agency, and we're dedicated solely to the healthcare industry. We've been around for about 20 years. So I think that's enough about us, and we'll get stuck into why we're here today. So for the sort of marketers and brand teams in the room, the challenges with digital marketing are constant. So whether it be budget constraints, compliance issues, industry government regulations, platform-specific requirements, or sort of navigating those internal approvals from stakeholders who may not fully understand your strategies. You probably have, really big blue sky ideas, ambitious goals for what you want to achieve in digital, but it's really easy at the same time to feel quite overwhelmed and paralysed with all these potential roadblocks. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, the digital strategies that you have active may not be delivering the results that you expect. And often, we don't have the luxury of, really large budgets to recreate an entirely new campaign, flip the creative, or build new platforms. So today, it's really about sort of exploring how the principles of atomic habits can reshape your approach to digital marketing. And we'll look at the power of small incremental changes, how to build identity-based habits, and the art of establishing sort of effective routines. Regardless of your position within your company, whether you're briefing in the campaign, creating the campaign, or the ones approving it, these principles can help make meaningful impacts to your digital marketing efforts. So what's on the agenda for the next hour? Firstly, we'll explain what the atomic habits are for those who haven't heard of it. We'll look at how we can apply these practical strategies to digital marketing. We'll take you through an example of how we have applied that theory of small changes and yielded big results for one of our clients. And finally, we'll share with you a framework that you can implement across your brand or digital activity. First things first, what are the Atomic Habits? So if you haven't heard of it, Atomic Habits by James Clear is about tiny changes leading to remarkable results. So the book goes into a lot of detail on how to establish good habits to help you get 1% better every day. For example, if your goal is to run a marathon, which is a pretty big target, particularly for me, you can't just go out one morning and run a half marathon, throw 21 Ks out in your first run. The reason many people fall short of their goal is because they don't adjust their daily habits to reach the goal. So this book explains how building those small, consistent habits can lead to big results over time, whether it's a month, 6 months, 10 years. This is the principle that we're going to be applying to digital marketing today, and look at how small shifts lead to those powerful outcomes. So if you haven't listened to the podcast, you haven't read the book, there are 3 key lessons that we want to share. Lesson 1, small habits make a big difference. And this is about focusing on getting just 1% better every day. The second lesson is to actually forget about setting goals. So focus on your systems instead. One of the great things about this book is that we're told that if you're having trouble changing your habits, the problem isn't you, which is always wonderful to hear. It's actually the system that you have in place. So effective systems make achieving your goals a natural result of consistent positive actions rather than a one-time effort. So if you're not reaching your goal, review the systems that you have in place and then set yourself up for success. Lesson 3 is to build identity-based habits. Yes, Steve? I can see you've got your hand up. Oh, no.
Sorry, I just saw someone else had raised their hand, but Alex had raised their hand, but I couldn't see anything further than that. So, no.
Okay. Maybe just any questions, we can just pop in the Q&A.
Okay, yeah, yep.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so identity-based habits. This focuses on changing your habits by shifting your identity or how you see yourself. So if we continue with the example I touched on earlier, and just bear with me for a moment, instead of setting a goal like I'm going to run a marathon, just focus on becoming a runner. So start by simply saying, I am a runner. So then prove this to yourself through small wins, running around the block, and gradually increasing this over time. Over time, these small successes will reinforce your identity as a runner and making the natural outcome for who you've become as a marathon runner. How on earth can this relate to digital marketing? We will get there as we go through. But for now, let's say your goal is to increase email subscribers. Instead of focusing solely on the outcome of growing your email list, focus on becoming a marketer who consistently engages with your audience. See yourself as someone who excels in audience engagement. Okay, how to create good habits. So the next portion of the book goes into a lot of detail about how we can create good habits. James Clear calls them the 4 laws of creating new habits that will stick. First law is make it obvious. So this is the habit that needs to be effortless for us. It requires no active thinking. For example, leaving your medication next to your toothbrush. Next one is make it attractive. So if the habit is unattractive, we're unlikely to have enough willpower to do it over and over and over again. So therefore, try and come up with some ways to make the habit attractive, even if it's hard. Making it easy. So the less friction there is between you and the habit, the greater the chances are that you'll actually do it. So this applies to simple things like packing your gym bag a day before you want to go to the gym. And make it immediately satisfying. So our brain rewards immediate returns. So it's good to come up with something simple that brings us joy right after we perform the habit. So for nearly a century, professional cyclists in Great Britain had seen very little success. In 2003, this changed when David Brailsford, a new performance director, introduced his strategy of the aggregation of marginal gains. And this focuses on tiny incremental improvements in every single aspect. So how did Brailsford's team implement the aggregation of marginal gains philosophy? They started with improvements that you would expect from a pro cycling team, redesigning bike seats for comfort, for example. But they went further than that. They were making small changes, such as finding the best mattress and pillow for each and every rider so that they would have a better sleep at night and be more rested to ride. They even hired surgeons to teach and educate riders how to wash their hands more effectively to reduce the chance of them getting sick. And here we have the aggregation of marginal gains. So within 5 years, they were dominating. After 10 years, they had 178 World Championships, 66 Olympic and Paralympic gold medals, and 5 Tour de France victories. Okay, so enough about the cult books, running cycling teams. We're going to take you through how we can apply the Atomic Habit principles to digital marketing, and I'm going to hand over to Jess.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Bon, for covering, a bit of an intro to the book and the concepts for those who may not have heard of it before. But as Bon's just mentioned, we really wanted to dive into how we can take the lessons from this book and apply them to digital marketing. So we're going to start with lesson 1. And so the first lesson that Bon just outlined for us is that small habits make a big difference. So we need to focus on getting 1% better every day. And if we thought about how we could apply that to digital marketing, we really believe that small optimizations can make a really big difference. So if we broke down each element of our next campaign into its small parts, how could we improve each element by 1% so that the campaign altogether benefits from the aggregation of incremental gains? So if we took an example of something, simple like a paid social ad, there's so many elements we could improve: the targeting, the copy, the headline, the CTA, the asset, the landing page. Are we using the right objective? There's so many things we can consider there. And so, sorry, Bon, just on the first one. But yeah, if we took that example, the biggest moment, sorry, yeah, I was on the second slide, my mistake. Thanks, Bon. The second lesson is to forget about setting big goals and focus on your systems instead. So when we apply this to digital marketing, it's all about the processes, the constant optimization of your digital marketing efforts. So if we were to consider what systems are tripping us up, how can we overcome those barriers to improve our ways of working? Are there approval processes that need reviewing? Do we need wider stakeholder engagement? If we use a bigger example of the goal of increasing website traffic by 30%, instead of just focusing on setting the goal of increasing traffic, can we focus on developing and optimizing systems that will drive that increase? So what might the next step be? Is it establishing a routine for creating and publishing new high quality content regularly? Do we then want to consider a systematic approach to SEO, including your on-page and off-page factors? Is there meta tagging? Do we want to build some backlinks? Do we need to be monitoring our keyword rankings? Then we could consider developing a consistent social media strategy. So regular posting, engaging with followers, and analyzing your performance on a month-on-month basis. Do we want to consider setting up regular reviews of our website analytics to track performance, identify trends, and make data-driven adjustments to our strategies? Lesson number 3. So lesson number 3 is all about building identity-based habits. Decide the person that you want to be and prove it to yourself in small wins. If we think about this principle and applying it to digital marketing, and creating that identity-based habit, there's kind of one additional element that we need to consider from a marketing perspective, and that's our audience. So often we get caught up in what we want to achieve from the campaign, what's our organization getting out of it? And of course, that's completely important, but we need to consider from an audience perspective, what are they looking for? What do they need help with? What are their pain points? So if we considered the audience needs, and we just took a straightforward example of digital marketing trends. So if your audience struggles with finding reliable information about digital marketing trends, your system should include creating and publishing regular in-depth content that addresses these trends. And then the organization goals would be to increase brand authority and drive traffic to the website. So if we try and find a sweet spot between those two, we can align creating valuable content and addressing the needs of the audience with the goal of boosting brand authority. And then you kind of hit that sweet spot of what you want to achieve and what your audience needs from you. So that then becomes your brand identity that you need to deliver in each digital element. So you'll become the go-to source for digital marketing insights by having that consistency, that regular content. And that not only fulfills your audience's needs, but it also solidifies your brand presence and that brand identity of the person that you're trying to be. So, in conclusion, if we integrate the organizational goals with the audience needs through a well-defined system, you'll then become and embody your brand identity in all digital interactions. The next step is all about how we bring this to life. So now that we understand the importance of improving the systems, finding those 1% improvements, and thinking about the identity behind the identity-based habits, we can then consider how we can apply this to digital marketing. The next portion is actually going to focus on how we go ahead and create those good habits using the 4 principles of creating good habits that Bon went through at the start. So I'm just going to take a sip of water before I get into this. So if we started with making it obvious, there are some examples of ways that we can make the new habit we're trying to achieve obvious. So in his book, he goes through like so many examples, but we'll start with a couple. So habit stacking, that's all about associating it with a current habit that you do every day. Implementation, intention, so that's clearly setting an intention. So I will do this behavior at this time in this location. Environment design is all about making good habits easy or bad habits difficult through your space around you. So I'll just pause here before I get into this slide and just say, like, throughout this, we wanted to bring in some practical ways of how we've implemented this, like, in our everyday working lives at Cube. But all of these examples may not be 100% applicable to every person here today, dependent on your role or your organization, but they should provide clear examples of how we implement these practices to specific areas of digital marketing and overall ways of working. So if we took the goal of building a genuine community online, there are some things that we need to do. And that is like to create a really genuine and authentic community. So for example, we want to do two-way communication with our audience. We want to actually spend some time in platform and engage with other accounts and the content that other people are putting out there. And we also want to make sure that we have really frequent and engaging content through our content planning. And kind of, if we considered how we could take these principles of these principles from the book and apply it to digital, there's some examples I want to share that I do kind of implemented in my ways of working, as silly as they may seem, but they really help you change your everyday behavior. So habit stacking, like I love to have my morning cup of coffee at my desk. It's my thing that I like to do every day. So before I even open up my emails and get into the task list and kind of what's happened, I like to spend some time checking in with the social accounts that I manage, do some genuine engagement, respond to comments, and kind of see what other people are posting and engage with that content. The second one, so implementation intention, when we talk about I will do this behavior at this time, a great example of that is content planning. So be really consistent with the content planning. So I plan the content on the first Monday of each month for the following month, and I really try to stick to that so that we keep up that consistency and frequency and improve our ways of working to reach that goal of building a genuine community online. The third is environment design. So, you know, if we consider just straightforward ways to make our day-to-day lives easier. So, you know, we use our bookmarks to bookmark all the different things that we need, from Meta Business Suite to community engagement matrices, and even establishing something like a community engagement matrix that outlines the parameters of how you can engage with your audience, what accounts you can engage with, who you can speak to online, makes that environment really well designed and setting you up for success to build a genuine community online. So in terms of making it attractive, there's 3 kind of examples that we have here. So temptation bundling, motivation, ritual, and culture. So if we consider just on the next slide, Bon, sorry. Thank you. The goal of improving your website for better SEO or UX and conversion, there are so many elements that we need to consider. And generally, website projects, you know, tend to be very large and all-consuming, as I'm sure those who have worked on them can attest to. But if we think about different ways we can ensure this gets done, it becomes our ways of working. So in the example of temptation bundling, that's all about pairing an action that you want to do with one that you need to do. So what is one component of the role that you love or that makes you feel motivated? So I find myself particularly motivated and engaged like immediately after we've had a client meeting or a discussion on the project. So after each meeting, I would then go and review a portion of the website to keep that task moving forward, and kind of why all the ideas are fresh in my head. And whilst that's just a simple process, it then is always working towards that goal of improving the website. Motivation ritual. So do something you enjoy immediately before a task that you might find is difficult, or one that you kind of always put to the bottom of your task list. So, you know, for me, I find my brain really starts firing after some social interactions, having a good conversation like I've just outlined. So something we like to do as a team is get everyone in the room, touch base with how everyone's going, and, you know, get some snacks, make it a bit fun. But then we can go through the website project on the big screen and start brainstorming and start getting everyone's kind of creative juices flowing. We can look at competitors. We can even do some live Google searching to see what we find and get like a good lay of the land. And then the third one's culture. So that's all about joining a culture where your desired behavior is normal. And I'm just going to do a shameless plug here and say you could work with a fantastic agency that are super fun like us. Forgive me. Principle 3. So this is all about making it easy. So there's 3 kind of ways we can do that. It's about mastering the decisive moment. It's about reducing friction and priming the environment. So if we just go ahead to the next slide, mastering the decisive moment. So we want to optimize the small choices that deliver outsized impact. When we consider all of the things in our digital campaigns, one of the most significant moments of impact is when that piece of creative that you've been working on lands in the feeds of the audience. So as marketers, we want to do everything we can to maximize when we can do what we can deliver in that moment. One of the best ways to do this is to ensure that you're really considering your creative per placement. So one of the things that like I always try to fall back to when we're doing a paid social campaign is like, what actual placement will this be landing in, and what kind of fields are available? So if you can imagine, like when you're using social media, and this is such a straightforward kind of thing, but if you're looking at a reel, you really focus on the content that's in the reel, and then the copy is kind of supporting that. So if we're doing a paid campaign and we're going to use a reels placement, how can we make sure we're making the most of that placement? And that is going to then be slightly different to an in-feed placement, because we have different fields, we have the different call to actions, we have, you know, more copy available. So we want to make sure that we're actually considering where that lands and maximizing that decisive moment, and to ensure that you get the most out of your campaign. And then once we've got those basics and foundations into place, we want to also make sure that we're testing. So even if you started with a really small A/B test of just like a different image or a different call to action, that's a great place to start. So even if you're doing a Facebook campaign, you've got different buttons available. If the only optimization or like creative test you do is just between the 2 buttons, you can actually get some really interesting insights, and one will obviously outperform the other. So you can see how little bits of insights and little optimizations over the course of your campaign, over the course of multiple campaigns, over the course of a year of campaigns can actually make a big impact when you tie together all those little small 1% improvements in those decisive moments. So the next one is reducing friction. So that's all about decreasing the number of steps between you and the new habit that you wanted to achieve. So, you know, is there an approval barrier? Is there something that you're kind of getting stuck on time and time again? Maybe you can try a meeting with the broader team to see like what the concerns are, what the guardrails are, and just get everyone on the journey of where we're trying to land. Because I think once people understand like why it's so important to this creative testing, or what that actually means, or which elements are we testing, then we can actually reduce the friction and kind of make the whole process move smoother if we kind of remove those barriers up front and have those conversations. The third one, that's all about priming the environment. So that's all about preparing your environment to make your future actions easier. And again, once you've done your first A/B tests, can we use that document or framework for future approvals? Can we reference that? Is that template that you're using, does that work for everyone, or do we need to make that simplified so that we're priming the environment for the next creative test and the next creative test after that? So in terms of making it satisfying, there's 3 kind of key principles here, and that's reinforcement, tracking your progress, and never missing twice. So in here, I just wanted to use some, you know, not so specific examples to channels or creative, but just the general ways of working and implementation of a digital strategy. So you know, with reinforcement, that's all about immediate reward when you complete your habit. So is that providing quick and swift feedback to your team, the people that you manage? Is it rewarding yourself as well for completing that goal? Is it sharing your wins with the broader team? So tracking progress. So that's all about tracking those small victories and wins. And I know there's a few familiar names in the crowd, but for those that work with us at Cube, I love Bonnie's #1 favorite thing is a WIP tracker. So ticking off any smaller tasks that make up that larger task can be so satisfying and so great for keeping up motivation, especially when things get, you know, when there's like longer term processes or approvals that we need to kind of keep revisiting. So going back to those documents and seeing those little elements ticked off is very satisfying. And sharing wins with like the broader team, or, you know, like if we're agency with our clients, or if you're a client with your wider stakeholders, just so they can really share on those wins and the tasks that they've kind of been working on as well. And the third one is never missing twice, which I guess is quite straightforward, but you know, we don't need to save it for next time every time. So obviously there's going to be a lot of reasons why we can't make an optimization or make those changes, those small 1% improvements, but let's not miss them twice. Let's not let an opportunity pass us by twice, and let's make sure that we can apply it, maybe not to this campaign, but definitely the next.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, so we wanted to share with you, I guess, a bit of a tangible example of how we've applied this to a real campaign. So obviously we've gone through some hypothetical examples, some suggested ways to optimize, but we really wanted to, I guess, share, you know, what the results were by making these small changes. So firstly, in terms of where we started, so we were challenged with building a digital strategy for an existing disease awareness campaign around a disease called ankylosing spondylitis. This campaign had been created by another agency and had already been running for 12 months. So the client felt they weren't necessarily getting the results they wanted. They felt, you know, that there was significant reach, but they didn't really feel that it was actually reaching the right audience based on the conversions and the engagements. And so they wanted to see where we could take it. The creative was set, the website was live, we were handed social content and a live search campaign, and they really wanted us just to move forward with what they had. What was the process? What did we do? So firstly, we did start with a really comprehensive SWOT analysis of the 12-month campaign that had already run. but we also did a deep analysis of that broader landscape in the digital space for that disease area specifically. So the client had already invested, a large amount of money into building this campaign, building its website, its assets, its creative. So they really didn't want us to come in and recreate everything and feel like that they hadn't sort of made the most of what they'd just done. So what we did was then build a revised approach, which really focused on optimization of the existing digital elements, leverage and repurpose what we could, but aim to deliver greater value at every touch point. So in the SWOT analysis and that process, what did we uncover? So the website had some technical flaws, website content wasn't all that patient-centric, the creative didn't seem to be resonating, there was a very broad sort of paid strategy, which was trying to reach a very small targeted audience. Messaging was quite vague, and there was a lot of sort of taglines. So it was quite tagline heavy. There were some resources that were good, but not as practical for a potential consumer. So what we felt we needed to do was focus more on what the audience needed versus what we needed to achieve from a campaign perspective. And that mindset really shifted how we approached everything. We did have to look at sorting the potential optimizations by effort and impact and phase those updates accordingly. So they didn't want a long pause in the campaign. They wanted it to just keep running. So we had to look at, okay, we have a short opportunity to pause. What are those quick wins? So what can we do in that first phase to make some very small optimizations and then get the campaign back up and running? That was very much website quick wins, some functional pieces, and a short campaign burst in Meta, which had some slight optimizations in messaging. Phase 2, we got a little bit more detail. This is where we did a sort of larger scale website refresh, adding content and optimizing it more for SEO, refining the content in a few other ways. And then phase 3 was kicking straight back into then that sort of fully fledged always on campaign across social and search. So we're going to share a few examples of those changes that yielded some of those big results. So we went from the more sort of generic search terms that could be captured by a huge audience, like back pain, and we shifted it to exercises for AS. So focusing on those AS-related search queries and sending them to relevant landing pages versus sort of the same landing page for all. There was really solid and valuable content within the website that really wasn't being seen, which we found out through like some hotspot testing on the website. So we looked at, okay, how can we leverage this rich content as part of the search campaign? So we integrated that. The website, in terms of the technical side of things, had a shrink that was quite low in terms of the load time. The navigation tabs were a little bit vague, so it was unclear in terms of what the audience was going to reach when they went to that tab. The content probably could have been fleshed out a little bit more so that there was more value when a consumer landed on that page. And then there was an inconsistency in sort of call to actions. So we made simple changes like just updating the navigation to be more practical and clear. We added some more content which was based directly on search queries, and we just increased the consistency and the visibility of the main call to actions. In terms of the creative, the phase 1 utilised paid actors in some hero videos, and the messaging and the call to action didn't provide, I guess, the action that a consumer could take. So we shifted to sharing real patient stories and focusing on those clear steps that someone could take. So we ran this next phase of the campaign with 71% less paid media spend than the initial campaign. There was 37% live time of the campaign, yet we saw a huge increase in some of the key metrics. So 22% increase in downloads and 63% increase in survey completions. And those survey completions also included some insights that would help us figure out whether we were hitting the right audience. And that really demonstrated some really strong metrics for the client. So we've now taken you through the theory and showed you a sort of practical example of how it can be implemented. We're now going to run through a framework which you can then take and implement that across your own brand or campaign activity. And Jess is going to take you through that one.
Amazing. So, you know, it's all well and good to, for us to talk about all of this and show you guys what we've been working on and how we apply this thinking. But we wanted to kind of help with a framework of how you would identify where to make those 1% changes, because that's what this is really all about. So 1% changes to every single element, compounding to those really big results. So there's kind of a few steps. So the first being an opportunity analysis, the second being a destination audit, the third is what we like to call kind of pie in the sky thinking. The fourth is all about bringing that back to earth into a more practical sense. And the fifth is all about prioritization and phasing. So step one, that's all about doing your opportunity analysis. So depending what data points you have available to you, you want to actually review the current activity. So do you have any social media insights? Is there campaign data from previous activity? Is there GA or Adobe Analytics or website analytics data that you could actually go ahead and review and just kind of see if there's any little tidbits of information that you can take from them? And if you're going through those 3 steps, you want to at least kind of pull out one key insight from every platform, you know, at a minimum, and just jot those down. The second being the destination audience. So, you know, so often I think, you know, and I do this myself, is we fall into the trap of like, what's the campaign? What's the creative idea? You know, because that's the super fun stuff. But we want to be like practical and consider where are we pointing people to? And then what action do we want those people to take? And is this action on that landing page easy to do or clear? The third is all about that pie in the sky thinking. So, you know, if we didn't have restrictions, if we didn't have budget limitations, like what could we do? If we had unlimited budget, what would we do without any restrictions, and kind of get some really big key ideas? And I think when we do this step, it really reverts back to that thinking of, you know, what does our audience need? So what are they looking for? What are their pain points? What can we help them with? What do we have to offer? Because, you know, in the industry of consumer, we are the thought leaders. We have the research. We have so much valuable insight and information. And the people out there, the audience, are often looking for that valuable information. And so how can we deliver that to them in an engaging and fun way? And then we want to bring it back down to earth. So we've got all these big ideas and, you know, things that we think, oh, you know, like my target market would just love that. That would be so helpful for them. But how can we then apply those to small areas and optimizations within the campaign? And, you know, depending on the campaign that you're running, whether it's paid, whether it's email marketing, there's so many different executions and channels, but there's always something to test. So, you know, is it testing your creative messaging? Do we think, okay, we need to reconsider our channel approach? Is it as simple as something of placement? So, you know, like I mentioned before about reels or stories, is there like one piece of content that we have that actually would make a fantastic reel, and let's just focus on executing that really nicely so someone can get the information very quickly and clearly. Targeting, so, you know, that lends itself to the example that Bond spoke about. So are we reaching our target audience? Are there different ways that we can reach them? You know, like the insights that we found when reviewing that keyword research was really instrumental to the next phase of our approach, because we actually didn't need to be going so broad when we have people literally searching related to you know, the symptoms and the exercises. The call to action, so that's obviously a really important element. You know, is it just simply testing 2 different call to actions, learn more versus download? You know, with our copy, can we just be really clear in what we're offering people? You know, why they need to download it, why they need to click, what they're going to get out of it, as well as our campaign messaging. You know, if it's email, is there subject lines we can test? Can we try something new? Do we have a call to action in our header image? Is there a way that we can kind of bring all of these elements together and make sure that we're consistent across our website and our campaigns? So just bringing some of those really great ideas down into practical small elements of the campaign. And then prioritization and phasing. So, you know, this leads to kind of what we do often. It's like, what are the quick wins? What are the long-term optimizations? And phase according to the budget requirements and other business needs. So what's going to have the most impact versus what is the most effort, and kind of, you know, start with the items that are lower effort but maybe high impact. And just remember the reason we're doing all of this, and that is that small changes compound to big results over time. And so just to, you know, try and tie this up and wrap it all up in a little bow, is that once we've kind of identified where those 1% changes need to occur, we need to turn those plans into progress. So we take those 4 laws, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying, and we use those principles of creating good habits to stick to the implementation plans, improve our ways of working, and achieve those results. So where to from here? I'll hand back over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Jess. So yeah, obviously we've gone through the theory, the practical, the ways that you can take this forward. So we really sort of feel that there are 3 options in terms of where you can go from here with your current activities. So first option, you can do nothing, but unlikely that that's going to move the needle for you, or give you any benefits. 2, what you can do is take what you've learned today and implement it yourself. So if that's the path that you think may work best for you, there's a QR code on the screen, and that's where you can sort of request the download to a workbook, which is based on this framework. So really steps out all of those opportunities within the workshop section. And it's a really good tool that can help you and your team start to analyze the current digital channels and perhaps look at starting to identify those 1% optimizations. So that can be something that you do by yourself. That could be something that you can sort of sit down with some of your team members to do. 3, if you do want any support along the way, please feel free to reach out. You know, obviously we're going to share everything after. My contact details are available here as well via the QR code. Jess and I are happy to answer any additional questions. Obviously we've got a couple that we'll cover off at the end here, but please reach out after if you have any further questions about what we've presented, or if you want to sort of look at where you can take the current activities and move them forward. And then really just to wrap things up before we go into the Q&A section is I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you to CHP as well, the lovely team, for having us. Yeah, hope you found it helpful, and really just focus on the small wins, because doing it all at once can be extremely daunting. Back to you, Steve, and then I'll just have a look at the Q&A perhaps.
Great. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, look, I think have we got a question there? Can you tell us about a time when a client who wanted change was resistant to habit changes, and how did you deal with that?
I wanted to change, was resistant to the habit. So the client wanted to change the campaign, but was resistant to the habits or the changes that we were recommending. Is that the?
I think that's the way I take that to be. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that does come up quite a bit, I would say. A lot of the time, and I think it comes back to that sort of overarching thinking, even that sort of identity-based habits where we really think about that end goal. Yes, we really need to increase this website traffic. We need to do this. And they're probably really focused on, I guess, that end goal and not really stepping it out into what we need to achieve. So I guess what we do first is talk through how we can get there, and really explaining that there are some functional pieces or some sort of key optimizations that if they aren't amended at all, you're unlikely to be able to reach that goal. So it's really trying to explain clearly all the different sort of puzzle pieces, how they fit together. Because I think if you provide rationale, if you can provide some very clear thinking, you can provide some clear insights that lead to a strategy, people are going to be more open to coming on board versus saying, this is what we recommend. Are you free to sign it off? So I guess, Jess, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a really like good answer, Bonnie. And the other thing is like, what are the concerns? So what is the resistance coming from? And just trying to get an understanding of where that resistance is coming from can help us, because then we can help our clients, you know. So there might be something really helpful we can do in terms of the approval process, in terms of breaking it down, in terms of meeting with a different person in the team to help explain. And then I think another like nice idea from the habits is, you know, that one that's all about like what's something that you love doing and stacking that with it. So, you know, is there a portion that the client really like enjoys about marketing, and is there something they're super passionate about, and maybe we can like kind of start with that area first.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other questions there, so hopefully you'll indulge me with a question of my own. And it's very self-serving, obviously, but it's about the meshing, I guess, of the compliance requirements with that creative element as well. Sort of looking at the 5-step framework. Whereabouts do you see what's the best step to bring in those the regulatory guidelines or the compliance issues? Because obviously you don't want to stifle creativity, but you also don't want to head too far down a path that's not open to you because of those compliance risks. So yeah, do you have a preferred step where you would introduce that, the requirements?
Yeah,
like kind of, oh, you go.
Sorry, Steve. I would say, I mean, for us, there's probably only one element within that framework where we throw compliance out the window, and that's this pie in the sky thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we always have to have that in the back of our mind at every step of the journey. But as you say, we don't want it to limit the creativity. So there's really that sweet spot in the middle where we've had our initial thinking about, what the opportunities are, what can we learn, what's working, what's not working. And then that middle, it's open for every idea and any idea. And we really try and entirely forget about the compliance side. Then when you bring it back down to earth, that is when the compliance hats come straight back on, and we're like, okay, that was a great idea, but it's not going to happen. So how can we try and get that same effect or that same desire from that huge idea and make it compliant? And I would say within this industry, it's very rare that we are going to be able to achieve our pie in the sky idea. But we can really utilize and leverage that creative thinking to just think a little bit more outside of the box. But I think it also comes down to step by step. again, those incremental changes, don't try everything at once. Really have to bring the people on the journey. I would say where we can involve the compliance teams early on, whether that's you're working internally, whether that's, you know, an agency, and I guess really help them understand what we're trying to achieve, because sometimes the people within the compliance teams have really great ideas, and they even, I mean, I've had some great people in compliance who sort of put on their own little marketing hats, and they come up with something or a workaround that they really feel can move the dial and that we could try. And I think that's really important. It's making sure that you're utilizing everyone's ideas, everyone's expertise, and you might get some gold nugget insights from someone who you'd at least expect it to come from.
Right. That's a really good answer, really helpful. And I think, that combining of the different areas of expertise, and because, you know, you are all working towards the same goal, but you're coming at it from different perspectives. So that's really good. There is another question here. So, what does a good review process look like, considering creative development, compliance reviews, and approvals?
Yeah, I would say it's going to be different between every single company, and even sometimes it's going to be across different brands within the same company. I would say what we have found helpful with some teams is really starting with a conceptual review. So before you go down the full path of building a full content plan, creative assets, it's starting with more of the concepts first, copy first. Things change significantly when you go into the visual space, but it's really, I mean, there's not a whole lot that you can change in terms of the process when it comes to you know, the internal compliance. But yeah, I would say just bringing people on the journey as early as possible, making sure that your brand teams are having a really good review prior to the formal compliance review, instead of it going basically from agency straight in to whatever platform you're using, because there's going to be internal intricacies or learnings that someone might have within the brand team. So it's really important that you try and help the agency come along and learn with you, because they're not always going to know from the very beginning.
And I think to add to that point, something that's really helpful, if it's like a platform that you haven't done before, for example, if it's the first time you're ever doing search, just getting all the stakeholders a good understanding of the character limitations, the platform requirements, and things like that. Because you know, so often the first thing you get is like, okay, well, we have to have this, but we only have 25 characters. So we need to just be really clear on what those requirements are in terms of in platform, and that's very one small piece of the puzzle, but ultimately we won't be able to upload it, which is obviously something we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think helping visualize some of those things as well is really helpful, particularly with something like a search campaign. I think it's a really good example, Jess. It's very hard to visualize how a search campaign will come out with all the different fields and options of what you can put in platform. So it's trying to give whoever's reviewing and approving a very clear idea of how you might mix and match all those things and what the potential opportunities are, and how you might lock them into position, for example. So instead of just having your sort of fields filled out, it's then providing the review team with even a mock-up of what that happens. This is what a call to action button is. This is where it will be visible, and this is how it will be, viewed alongside this message. Because I think we all know, particularly from a compliance perspective, you can't look at things as a standalone asset within particularly those digital activities, because there's so many different elements. So you can't look at them in isolation. You have to look at them in a whole.
Good. Thank you so much. Well, look, I think we're very close to the end, and I just wanted to make a couple of final comments before we do finish up the webinar and let everyone get back to their day. But Bonnie, Jess, thank you so much for this morning's presentation. I found it really helpful as well, and I think, you know, this whole idea, this notion of breaking things down into smaller steps, manageable steps, you know, the 4 things to, you know, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying. And I think, you know, fantastic application to digital and social, but I also think, you know, application to every other aspect of work and even personal life. I think it's, you know, that breaking things down into smaller and smaller steps that you can, you know, tick off as you progress is really valuable, and probably the best way of leading to lasting habit change. So thanks again. I got a lot out of this morning's webinar. I'm sure the other attendees did too. Just before we finish up, I do have a shameless plug to make as well. And that's for the next CHP event, which is our awards night on October 31 at Sergeant's Mess. And that'll be a fantastic evening of networking and examination of great examples of advertising and promotion. And I would encourage everyone to attend if you haven't already signed up for that. And Dave assures me you don't have to have sent an entry in for the awards to come along and enjoy the evening. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. Jess and Bonnie, again, thank you. And finish up the webinar with just a couple of minutes to spare. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody.
Have a good day.